I was wondering if anyone else has also had any experiences with people that didn't quite seem to be people, like there was something off about them. I had an experience some time ago that I've never could shake off. So this happened in Charleston, SC, around Christmas of 2017. I used to work at a popular coffee shop that was inside of a popular big box retail store. One day, around Xmas time, I had two guests that struck me as odd immediately. They were pale Caucasian women, probably mid-20s, that both looked nearly identical, but one was about a head taller. They had the exact same haircut, very straight platinum blonde bowl-like cuts. Their faces were quite round and their eyes were a noticeably bright hazel color and appeared quite large, but not in like a disproportionate gray alien kind of way. They both also had a fairly odd, stiff gait, as though they had a board strapped to their back. They sort of shuffled their feet around when they walked. They both also had on oversized sweaters, and I noticed later the shorter one had theirs on backwards. The weird part was their behavior. When they first walked in, the shorter one looked around the store as if they've never been in one. Her overall demeanor was somewhat childlike, like a good customer service rep. I welcomed them in and told them to ask if they had any questions. The short girl looked to the taller as if for approval. She then slowly nodded her head towards me, mouth slightly agape, and then attempted a hand wave. Instead of waving at the wrist like most people, she waves with her forearm, palm flat and straight in a sort of robotic windshield wiper-like motion. She then turns to the taller one, who gives her an encouraging nod. They then proceeded to walk around the cafe looking at the cups and merchandise. The short girl would often point all around the store and seem to be asking the taller one questions, almost as if this was a guided tour of sorts. Now, obviously, I'm no linguist, but my city is a fairly popular tourist destination, and have met foreigners from all over the globe. Even if I don't recognize a specific language, I can usually estimate roundabout where it may be from, whether it's Germanic, Slavic, Asiatic, Mid-Eastern, etc. in origin. But the language they spoke to each other was very strange, and not like one I've ever heard. Imagine if you mixed Simlish with baby babble and sped it up. Lots of g, blue, and oo sounds. They continued on, checking out the merchandise and going on what seemed to be a Q&A session. They would often open up cups and look inside, grab bags of beans and squeeze and shake them. At one point, the shorter one took apart a French press, and the taller one seemed to try to explain what it was for. This went on for about another 10 minutes or so, when the short one picked out a studded cup to purchase. She shuffles her way to the powers, puts the cup on the counter, frequently looking towards her friend as if looking for reassurance, who again does a simple nod in encouragement. She then looks towards me and attempts to smile, which was just bearing her perfectly straight. White top teeth as though she were biting her bottom lip, and slowly nodding, not saying a word. It was here I noticed her sweater was on backwards, the tag sticking out in front of her neck. Now that I had a good look, I will say she was quite oddly attractive, but there was something about her appearance that gave me uncanny valley vibes, but I couldn't tell you what exactly was off. I will say, I don't recall them ever blinking. I scanned the cup and went on the typical checkout spiel, to which there was no reply. When it was time to pay, she pulled out a silver credit card that had no markings whatsoever. No logos, no numbers, no name. Just blank plastic with a chip. She then looks back over to the taller one and says something, who then comes over and finishes the transaction for her, showing her as though it was a teaching moment. I hand her the cup, and she once again slowly nods her head, mouth ajar, and does her windshield wiper wave. They then shuffle their way out the cafe into the rest of the store, and I never saw them again. I've told this story to people before, and they usually hand wave it and say they were probably just tourists from Europe, or maybe they had a condition of sorts. But like I've said, I've encountered many foreigners, and none of them acted this much like a fish out of water, nor was their overall demeanor and behavior this uncanny. I won't rule it out as a possibility, of course, but it just doesn't quite sit satisfactory for me. It was just too weird. I love visiting my grandma. She always makes the food that I like, and in large quantities, and spoils me. With the hustle and bustle of college life, it's nice to go back to my childhood and allow myself to be spoiled for a few hours every few weeks. Even though she has 6 grandchildren, she made it clear that I'm her absolute favorite. She'd often have the whole family around for dinner, and after they left, she'd bring out the good stuff she made just for me. We usually have a big Christmas dinner together with the whole family. However, as the years go by and the younger ones start growing up, fewer and fewer people show up. Last year, everyone already made plans, forgetting about poor Grandma. I don't blame them, but they often forget how these visits mean a lot to her, especially ever since Grandpa died. That's why when I talked on the phone with her and she asked me if I had any plans, I lied to her and told her I didn't. She immediately jumped at the opportunity to politely invite me, going so far as to offer me to sleep over at her place. She said there's one room which hasn't been used in years, and I could stay in there. I immediately said yes and agreed to stay over, realizing how happy that would make her. I canceled the plans I made with my friends, telling them something else came up. Although they were bummed about it a little, their drinking party wouldn't stop because of me. That was the last Christmas that I would ever spend with my grandma. On Christmas Eve, I arrived to my grandma's place, and she greeted me like she always does, with a tight hug and lots of kisses. I barely even stepped inside when she started offering me food. She had already made what could only be described as an all-you-can-eat buffet. We dug in, and once we were done, she showed me where I could sleep for the night. It was a cozy little bedroom, which apparently used to be my mom's room when she was little. Grandma told me not to leave my room during Christmas night in order to avoid disrupting Santa in his work. She said that if I really needed to use the bathroom, I could, but to be extremely quiet and not to go downstairs. On the nightstand, she left a list of the things I should do before I go to bed to ensure I get a good present. I decided to play along and abide by the rules. I told her I'd read it before bed and do everything necessary, and she seemed content with that. She wished me good night and left the room. I was pretty tired from the trip there and the enormous dinner I've eaten, so I lay down on the bed and involuntarily fell asleep within minutes. I awoke a few hours later. I glanced at my watch and realized it was 3:01 a.m. I got up to grab a glass of water downstairs from the kitchen and groggily walked through the dark, trying to avoid any loud noise or turning on the lights, not to wake Grandma. I went downstairs and turned on the kitchen light, gulping down a glass of water. I glanced towards the living room at the Christmas tree, and something caught my attention under the glow of the decoration lights. There was a small plate with a tiny paper that said for Santa. I reckoned it was cookies and milk, but when I got closer, I realized that the plate was empty. Red liquid was in it, and right next to the plate was a small bucket. Obviously, I found this weird, but figured that Grandma may have just forgotten to put it away or something. I turned off the kitchen lights and returned to my room, just then remembering the list my grandma gave me. I grabbed it off my nightstand and started reading. Dear James, thank you for visiting me for Christmas. You made your grandma really happy. Now Christmas is a little different in this house than what you're probably used to, so it's very important that you follow these rules on the list. 1. Make sure to close your windows and ensure they are closed properly. These old windows don't work properly sometimes, so if you feel like cold air is coming in, let me know. 2. Don't put any wood in the fireplace after 9 p.m. Santa will be really angry if it's scalding in the chimney or if there's still smoke. 3. You didn't forget about milk and cookies, did you? I stopped reading and chuckled at the list. Grandma clearly wanted me to follow the basic rules for Santa like when I was a kid. But again, I decided to oblige. I continued reading the list. In this household, we don't use milk and cookies, we use raw meat and blood. I already left a bucket by the Christmas tree, and there's a raw piece of chicken I put on the plate. Santa sure loves his diet. 4. If you are woken up by the sound of scratching or knocking on your window, ignore it. Your room is on the second floor. There is no way to reach up to it. In fact, it's best not to look there, but if you see someone beckoning you, pretend they're not there. They may try to open the window from the outside. This is why it's so important to keep the windows closed. 5. You may hear growling coming from the kitchen. It's okay, because Santa never comes upstairs, and since I already left the chicken for him, that should satisfy him. By this point, I was sure Grandma was just messing with me. That was until I heard the sound of 3 gentle knocks on the window behind me. I froze in place, staring at the list, but practically staring through it. 3 more gentle knocks ensued, but I did my best not to give away that I heard them. Once again, there were 3 more knocks, and then the sound of scratching started. First gently, and then louder, as if a rat was trying to bite through the wall. It lasted for around a minute until it completely stopped. Only when it did I gather enough courage to slightly shift my position. That was a mistake though, because when I looked down to the floor, at the light which was cast in from the window, I saw the unmistakable shadow in the form of a humanoid silhouette stretched across. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like whoever was there held both his hands on the window and stared directly towards me. I decided that the best thing to do is continue reading the list to try and distract myself. 6. If someone walks into your room while you're sleeping and you happen to wake up, pretend that you're still asleep. In the worst case scenario, the person will sit on the edge of your bed and observe you, so do your best not to let them know you're awake. If you feel their breath on your neck and it gets progressively closer, it means they realized you're awake. 7. You may hear me calling you from downstairs. Don't listen to it. I will, under no circumstances, go downstairs during the night. 8. Last and most important rule. If you get up to go to the bathroom, never, ever, ever turn on any lights in the house. He has trouble noticing you in the dark, but if you turn on the lights, he will be able to follow you wherever you go, and then not even locking your door will help. 9. Follow these simple rules, and in the morning, we can open your Christmas presents. Love, Grandma. The scratching and knocking had already stopped by the time I was done reading, and the shadow from the window was gone. I got into bed and covered myself over my head, shivering, and not from the cold. Sometime during the night, I heard my door open, but did my best to ignore the footsteps and low growling noise. I either passed out or fell asleep sometime later, but all I know is I woke up to the sound coming downstairs from the kitchen. I shot up, looking around the room and at the window, rubbing my temples and thinking about the nightmare I had. I left my room and immediately heard my grandma's voice calling me from downstairs to come open the presents. I told her I'm coming, when I suddenly felt a grip on my wrist. I turned around and saw my grandma there, staring at me, wide-eyed. She leaned in and whispered in my ear, with a trembling voice, "You turned on the lights, didn't you?" I want some Hot Wheels, a stuffed iguana, and... My 6-year-old son, Jeff, sat on the bed next to me, thinking. I was typing up my son's Christmas list on my laptop, preparing to email it to Santa. Of course, I was merely going to send it to myself. I didn't trust any of those email addresses claimed to be run by the real Santa, and I wanted to play it safe, just in case some creep was trying to use parents' email addresses to stalk their children. "Is that it?" I asked Jeff. He was always a low-maintenance child and never demanded a whole lot. Jeff nodded. "That's all I can think of," he said. I smiled and sent the email before closing my laptop. "Now we just need to wait until Christmas morning," I told Jeff. He smiled as he jumped off my bed and ran off to play with his toys. The next morning, while Jeff was at school, I checked my email and was surprised to see a message titled, "Your son's Christmas list," from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it up. "Hi, Christina. I saw your son's Christmas list, and there's no need to buy those Hot Wheels or that stuffed iguana yourself, like with last year's gifts. I can send it right to you, and you can give it to him on Christmas. I can also confirm Jeff has been a good boy this year, one of the best I've seen. Signed, Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho." I was confused. Who was this? How did they know my name or email? How did they know my son's name for that matter, or what he wanted? I told myself it was just one of my friends from work playing along. Yeah, that was it. Yesterday I had chatted with some of my friends over texting about what our kids wanted for Christmas. So one of them had probably just made a new account to add to the fun. I deleted the email and went back to my usual business. Shortly after Christmas break began, I sent Jeff over to a friend's house while I went to the store and bought the toys he had asked for, along with some wrapping paper. After heading home, I checked my email again and noticed a new message from the same mysterious address that had emailed me last time. "Hi, Christina. I saw you went out and bought the gifts that I said I'd bring myself. That's okay. I'll bring my own surprise gift for Jeff instead. See, I've been a little short on elves this season, and I've been looking for new recruits to help me make toys. Jeff is such a good little boy. He'll make a perfect elf. Hope you don't mind me taking him up to the North Pole on Christmas Day. I promise I'll bring him down every now and then to visit. Signed, Santa Claus. Ho, 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 ho." My heart sank. I hadn't told any of my work friends that I had bought the gifts yet. Something weird was definitely going on. I decided to write a response back, angrily demanding whoever this person was to tell me who they were, why they were stalking me and my son, and informing him to stay the fuck away from us, or I would call the police. A few days went by with no response. I felt relieved, thinking the guy had finally got the memo and decided to leave us alone, and I completely forgot about it until Christmas Day. While Jeff was asleep during the night of the 24th, I wrapped up the presents and put them under the tree, as per tradition. The next morning, while I was still in bed, I expected to hear Jeff excitedly shouting from the living room that Santa came. I was surprised to hear absolutely nothing, not a single peep. I checked the clock. It was 8 in the morning. Strange. I'd usually expect Jeff to be up earlier than that, especially since it was the happiest time of year for a child. A few minutes passed, and I quickly became concerned. I decided to go downstairs to Jeff's room and check up on him to see if he was okay. I knocked on his door before cautiously peeking in. He was laying in his bed, the blanket pulled up to his head, and his back facing me. "Jeff?" I asked. He replied with a weird grunting sound. Was he sick? I walked over to him and rubbed his head. "Jeff, get up. Santa came." I stopped when I felt a pair of weird bumps on his head, buried underneath his hair. Jeff then turned his head to me, and I jumped in shock. His ears were pointed and covered in hair. His face was stretched out like a dog's muzzle. He grunted again and stuck one arm out from under the blankets. Instead of a hand on the end, there was a furry brown hoof, like that of a goat. My face turned pale as I stared in shock, unable to speak or move upon seeing my son's current state. At that moment, I heard a knock on the door. I ran upstairs, desperately hoping it was one of my friends from work who could help. I looked through the peephole and noticed an unfamiliar figure standing at the door. He was overweight, with a red jacket and a long white beard. Thankfully, I had locked the door, so the man couldn't come in even if he wanted to. I then remembered the weird emails from this month, so I pulled out my phone and opened up my web browser. There was an email from last night sent from the mysterious address. I opened it up, and what I saw nearly made me faint. I just stood there reading the message over and over again, trying to process everything as the man at the door continued to knock. "Hi, Christina. Since you turned down my request to make Jeff into one of my elves, I decided Jeff would make a good reindeer instead. My current reindeer are getting too old to pull the sleigh, and I need just one more kid to complete my new team. I'll be coming over tomorrow morning to pick him up. Signed, Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. This happened over 20 years ago. I was driving back home with my girlfriend at the time. It was Christmas Eve, and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family, but she got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of adult beverages. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave. Therefore, I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 p.m. or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along Highway 211. Now, this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit, but nothing to fear. I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The both of us were just driving and talking away, just two young lovers making the most of our moment together. There is a portion of the highway that descends down an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road are thick forests. There are no lights. The only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drive down the hill, cross the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway starts to flatten out that it happens. Something sprints across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slam on the brakes. I turn to my girlfriend and ask her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dot out in front of cars, not like that anyway. So for some reason, I decide to check it out. I turn the car around and switch on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had vanished in. I step out of the car and walk towards the woods. I don't see anything, but now it feels like perhaps I'd made a grave error. My heart is pounding, and the hairs on the back of my neck are standing at full attention, but I still don't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly the car's horn blasts. It's not a beep, beep, beep that you'd get if, say, your driver or passenger wanted you to hurry up and get in the car. No, this was a long blaring beep. I walk back into the car and ask my girlfriend why she leaned on the horn like that. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely this was the thing that ran in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud, and in one of his hands, he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us, and then he smiled and waved to us just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. While I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest beyond my car headlights. My girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye, and that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if making to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home, but they never found anybody, or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. The man was obviously looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers, for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently, so I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet, but I can tell you that I'm definitely extra vigilant now, especially near Deep Creek. I believe it goes without saying that every parent's worst nightmare is losing their children. 3 days ago, that nightmare became a reality for me as I took a single bite of Santa's cookie and went upstairs to wake my 2 boys up. My youngest, Clyde, had already been awake and sitting patiently on his bed, eagerly awaiting my signal to head downstairs and start opening gifts. This was not all too surprising. What 12 and 7-year-old boys sleep in on Christmas morning. What was surprising was that Jack's bed was empty. He was nowhere to be found, despite my tucking him in his bed and wishing him a good night around 9 p.m. the previous night. The detectives are supposedly still investigating, but I am fully aware of the horrifying statistic that after the first 48 hours of being missing, the chances of finding my son become very slim. I'm also quite sure that they still consider me a suspect, although their initial investigation failed to prove that. Earlier today, while helping Clyde with his math homework, I threw one of his little Nerf footballs across the room, and after a couple bounces, it became lodged between the wall and Jack's bed. I walked on over and pulled the bed away from the wall a bit to retrieve it, and that's when I noticed the loose floorboard. I don't understand how this was missed by both myself and the detectives that scoured his room, but it was quite obvious once I did notice it. I believe what I found in there may have something to do with Jack's disappearance. Being a single father of 2 and working a full-time job left me very little time, especially around the holidays, to carry on the many different Christmas traditions that I had as a child. So on the first day of December, when I first saw the little raggedy-looking elf on the shelf, I was very impressed that Jack had took it upon himself to start this tradition for his little brother. When I had first asked him about it, his demeanor changed drastically, and he demanded that no one ever touch the elf. I left it at that. After all, the story says the elf will lose its magic if touched by a human. I didn't want to ruin it for Clyde, so I just played along. Each morning, the little elf would show up in a new spot in our small home. I was so proud of my boy for being such a great big brother. The reason I bring the elf up is because what I found under the floorboard in his room was some kind of homemade children's book titled Elf on the Shelf. It was written crudely with different colored markers for each letter, although clearly written by someone with a very shaky hand. I handed the book over to the detectives, but not before writing down a copy for myself. I really don't know what to make of this, but I know it has something to do with whoever took my son. Elf on the Shelf. Have you ever wondered how anyone could know if you're naughty or nice each year as you grow? For hundreds of years, it's been a big secret. It now can be shared if you promise to keep it. This year you were chosen. He sent me to you. I watch and report on all that you do. My job's an assignment from the big man himself. I'm just his helper, a little scout elf. While I'm here visiting the place you call home, remain in your room. Be sure not to roam. Once you are ready, the mission can start. Whose name will you scream as he rips out your heart? Will it be Father or Clyde? He can't take you all, so you must decide. Each night while you're sleeping, to your room he will fly. No one can know, or else they will die. Of course, a little magic helps me be quick. I record your whole day and report with a click. I tell him if you have been good or been bad. The news of the day makes him happy or sad. One word about this and I'll report to the boss, but keeping this secret will not be a loss. In the car, at the park, or even at school, word will get out if you break a rule. He will be gone before you awake. Speak a word to anyone, and your brother he'll take. You'll jump out of bed and come running to see who will be the first to beg and to plead. Maybe in the kitchen, the bathroom, or the den is where you'll find dear Clyde met his end. I can hide on a plant, a shelf, or a frame. Where will I be? Let's make it a game. There's another important rule you must know. Choose to ignore it, and his rage will grow. Keep your window unlocked before you climb into bed. Think wonderful thoughts inside that little head. How else can he check how good you have been? He might start to think you forgot about him. The night before Christmas, My job's at an end. The rest of the year, in paradise we'll spend. So blow them a kiss and bid them farewell. We'll fly far away, but you can never tell. Of course they will miss you, but wait till next year. When the holidays come, I'll again reappear. I wish every girl and each boy a safe place to hide. Until next year, when I visit young Clade, I am only posting here out of complete desperation. If anyone knows anything that could help locate my sweet boy, please message me right away.